Parmenides and the Eleatics. In this section, we will learn about the philosophy of Parmenides, who explained his ideas more clearly than the philosophers before him. We will see how this philosopher, who rejected information from our senses as an illusion and based knowledge only on reason, drew a sharp line between reality and illusion with this different way of thinking. We will also learn about Melissos and Zeno, two famous names from the school he founded. Parmenides' poem. Born in the city of Elea in southern Italy, Parmenides, one of the most important pre-Socratic thinkers, was a very influential philosopher in the first half of the 5th century. Like the thinkers before him, there is no definite information about his life. This is because the two main sources on this subject, the information from Plato's dialogue Parmenides and the information from Diogenes Laertius' famous book, contradict each other. For example, Plato's dialogue says he was born around 515 BC, but Diogenes Laertius says it was around 540 BC. However, we know for sure that he was the first philosopher to write his thoughts in the form of poetry. Before him, natural philosophers used prose. The poem, which we can translate as On Nature, has a preface and two parts. In the first part of this poem, which is only partially preserved today, he explains what true knowledge is. The second part deals with the illusions that mislead humanity, the unreal information of the world of illusions. The poem shows that Parmenides is against all methods of knowledge that come from observation, research and examination. This stance led to the development of a coherent metaphysical system in philosophy. This system, which began to revive especially with Pythagoras and Xenophanes, was filled with new concepts and meanings. The narrator in Parmenides' poem is a young man who travels far beyond the path that people use every day. He leaves the darkness behind and rides towards the light in his horse-drawn chariot. On this journey, he is accompanied by the daughters of the sun who represent emotions. His goal is to reach the sacred temple of a goddess and learn from her what reality is. Finally, he stands before two doors, one leading to the night and the other to the day. And he doesn't know which one to go through. One of these doors will lead him to truth, the other to illusion. At that moment, the goddess speaks and tells her young guest that he must learn both. So the young man will learn both night and day. That is, he will learn both the beliefs of men, which are false, and the truth, which is certain. In this way, he will see and show us that reality has two different faces. Without realizing it, he will develop the teachings of Parmenides, which will influence all of Western philosophy, especially Plato's thought. When we explore this poem, which Parmenides wrote as a mythological story using metaphors, we really find two paths. On the first path, which is also the first part of the poem, Parmenides explains the path to reality. He states that there is only one reality, that change is impossible, and that existence is independent of time, always the same, necessary and unchanging. In the second path, which is the second part of the poem, he shows the path to illusions. He points out how wrong and deceptive the visible world is and how wrong the concepts we form with our senses in this world are. These two paths, which will determine Parmenides' method of acquiring knowledge, will lead him to develop his own method. This method is different from the method of the Ionian thinkers before him, who obtained information by observing nature and then thinking about it. Parmenides' method rejects using our senses and perceptions to form knowledge. In doing so, it also rejects the material world, the objective world, which is the source of sensations and perceptions. Parmenides does not trust the senses, which can only lead us to the world of appearances. Like Heraclitus, he emphasizes that we can only reach reality by listening to the voice of reason, because, according to him, true being can only be understood in this way. So, Parmenides bases his philosophy on two fundamental principles that he acquired in an almost divine way. First, being is, non-being is not. Second, to be and to think are the same thing, because if you can think about something, then thinking is the point. Then, by thinking about these two principles, he forms his system with the logical conclusions he reaches. According to him, it is very clear and certain that being exists because it is reasonable. This idea makes sense. Whatever exists, whatever can be thought about for Parmenides, is nothing but that being. Being is one and cannot be divided. It has no beginning, no end. It is infinite. It doesn't change over time. Being is always the same, and what we call time is not real because past, present and future are one. True being is something that is equal to itself in all respects, similarly bounded, whole and spherical. On the other hand, it is not so easy to accept that non-being exists, because non-being is nothingness, and this idea doesn't make sense. Nothing can make you believe that things can come from nothing. For the mind, there is nothing outside of what exists, and there never can be. That would just be an illusion. And the reason for this is that we humans live in a world that changes according to our senses and beliefs. So what Parmenides calls being rejects everything that the concept of being does not logically include. He puts all those things in the category of non-beings. These are the things in this category of nothingness, and the knowledge of nothingness is an illusion. On the other hand, true knowledge is the only kind of knowledge, and it is the knowledge of being obtained only from thought, according to the rules of logic. The way to reach this unique knowledge is through the logical analysis of the concept of being. Parmenides states that understanding the properties of being, not through observation and research, but through the knowledge he obtained after thinking about the concept of being, is the best way. In this way, he reconstructs the universe according to the rules of logic. He identifies reality with thought and replaces all the laws or principles of material existence with the principle of non-contradiction, which is the basic principle of logic. Because, according to him, only what exists in accordance with this principle is real. Its knowledge is true, it is real. This definition of being necessarily shows that change and movement are impossible. So it means that being does not change and does not move. Because these qualities are not within being, motion and change contradict the concept of being. The reason is that an object in motion will be in another place after a while. That is, that object is no longer in its original place. In this case, being and non-being, reality and nothingness become the same thing, which is impossible. Change, on the other hand, is that an object with certain properties becomes something new with other properties after a while, which means that that object is something else. Therefore, change also contradicts the concept of pure being. While the members of the Melissos school wanted to preserve both being and becoming by accepting a single basic substance, Heraclitus's reduction of being to becoming and Parmenides' rejection of becoming, and thus the emergence of brand new ideas, are the most important steps in the early stages of philosophy. Another important step is Parmenides' complete separation of knowledge obtained through observation and research, that is, experimentally, from metaphysical knowledge, and his clear statement that if we are to talk about being, we should only talk in accordance with reason and logical consequences. Even if this is not a brand new discovery, when we consider the Milesians' attempts to find a basic substance to explain the unseen side of nature from the seen side, and Heraclitus's particular emphasis that what is understood by the mind is more real than what is perceived by the senses, it is an innovation that Parmenides emphasized this view more definitively than others. No thinker before him had dared to say, as boldly as Parmenides, that true knowledge could be reached only by reasoning without resorting to any experiment, or had explained in such clear language that the knowledge gained from experiment would only drown us in illusions, and that illusions were the complete opposite of truth, and had based his whole philosophy on the illusion-truth opposition like him. Most importantly, he defined being in a new way, and laid the foundations of a new field in philosophy, which would later be called ontology, or metaphysics, or the science of being. Parmenides' whole thought can actually be summarized in a single sentence. If something is, it is. If it is not, it is not. It makes no sense to think that being was born, or needs such a thing, or to investigate the beginning of the universe. The universe consists of two realities, one active and the other passive. Parmenides founded a school of philosophy in Elea, the city where he was born. The members of this school are called the Eleatics, and Melissos and Zeno are two of the most famous.